Hello scholars, good morning. We're looking at measurement today and we're focusing on units of time. Alright, so we are looking at all the different segments, the little sections that we divide time into, from the seconds all the way to the millennium. Right? So there are instruments that can actually measure units of time less than seconds, in other words, split seconds, milliseconds. And there are times when we actually do need to get that precision depending on what we're trying to execute, right? Some machines need to be timed in milliseconds. But on average, generally speaking, we can make do with knowing time up to the second. I think most of us are okay with just knowing how many seconds we have left, right? So there are 60 seconds in 1 minute and 60 minutes in 1 hour. And of course we can express that time as fractions of an hour, like a quarter of an hour, 15 minutes, or half of an hour, 30 minutes, 3/4 of an hour, 45 minutes, and so on. Alright, now there are 24 hours in 1 day. Again, we can divide that up into two huge segments. If you look at the analog clock, you'll see it's 12 hours division, right? So from 1 second after midnight to midday, 12 o'clock in the day, that's AM. And 1 second after midday up until midnight, that's PM. Post-meridian, ante-meridian. Alright, so that's for the day. 24 hours in 1 day. 7 days make 1 week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 7 days in 1 week. 4 weeks in a month. Now this is not really exact because some months vary. So when we talk about the lunar month based on the movements of the moon, for example, that's a 28-day cycle, the moon cycle, the way the moon waxes and wanes, as we call it. Sometimes you see a full moon at night, and then another time you see what we call the gibbous moon, which is like 3/4 of the moon, and then we see a crescent, which is just less than a quarter. So the moon goes through phases, and the lunar month is based on the cycles of the moon. But months, only February really has 28 days, and not even that month sticks to 28 days all the time. So in a leap year, February will have 29 days, based on the fact that the revolution of the earth around the sun is 365.25 days. But we don't really acknowledge the quarter until every 4 years. We kind of just add those quarters together to make one full day, and we give that day to February because maybe it has the least number of days. So every leap year, February has 29 days, accounting for that 4 quarters that we kind of ignore for the other 3 years, right? Some months have 30 days, some months have 31 days. So this is not an exact, it's just an estimation, right? Typically, 4 weeks in a month, 28 days in one lunar month. 52 weeks in 1 year, 12 months in 1 year. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. I remember my months. 12 of them, 12 months in any given year. This was not always the case, right? It depends on the calendar that we're using, and some countries, some cultures around the world actually don't use the same calendar that we use, right? So they don't have the same number of months or the same number of days in a year. So don't think that this is set in stone. And our ancestors in centuries gone by had a different timing system, and different cultures had different timing systems. So don't think that this is the only one and this is the the be-all of calendars. As we evolve as humans, we have different ways of measuring time and different ways of, different calendars that we use. Alright, so 58 weeks in a year, 12 months in a year. Now we have what is called a fortnight, which is really 2 weeks or 14 days. Every 14 days, that's a fortnight. Some workers get paid every fortnight, every 2 weeks. Some workers get paid weekly, every 7 days. Some workers get paid monthly. So they get their salary at the end of the month. It all depends on where you work and what arrangements you have with your boss. Some workers get paid just when they do a job, right? A contracted work or that kind of thing. 365 days in a year, but remember, it's really 365 and a quarter. But we just kind of ignore the quarter until we have 4 full quarters. Every leap year, every 4 years, we just take that one whole day and we say, February here, you have this extra day because every other month has 30 or 31. You only have 28. You keep that extra day. So every 4 years, February has 29 days. So if you are born on February 29, what does that mean for the other 3 years when February doesn't have 29 days? Is it that you don't have a birthday? Or can you choose, maybe you choose to celebrate your birthday on the 28th or the 1st of March? Well, those are special folks who are born on February 29. The rest of us, though, our birthdays are guaranteed every year. Alright, so on the leap year, 366 for that extra day. Now we talk about a decade. A decade is a period of 10 years, right? So every 10 years, a decade is complete. And, many times we look back on past events and we'll say, well, that was the decade of so-and-so. Or, for example, I love to talk about the 70s. That's my favorite decade. The music, the way people spoke, just how their old vibes. I love the 70s. People talk about growing up in the 80s or the 50s or wherever. So those are decades. And the decades are special. They usually symbolize a particular era in human history, right? Particularly in this last century, we had lots of different, the heights of certain movements occurred within specific decades. And we use that to remember the decade, okay? Now, so 10 years is one decade. 100 years, which would be 10 decades, make 1 century. 100 years. So cent would indicate to you 100. 100 years in a century, which is 10 decades. And 10 centuries, which would be 1,000 years, that's a millennium. And the plural is millennia. So a millennium is 1,000 years. Wouldn't it be great if you would be born in 1 century and live out the entire other century and still be alive in the century after that? Persons have experienced that. You would have to be like 100 and something years old. So maybe you'd be born in the later part of 1 century, and you live out the entire 100 years of the next century and still alive in the one following that. That would be awesome. So everybody who is more than 102 is possible. It's possible you were born in 1 century, spent another century, and still in another one, in the 3rd century. That's cool. That's pretty awesome. Alright, so let's talk about BC, AD, BCE, and CE. Alright, so the Dionysian calendar is the calendar in which the terms BC and AD became popular, and it's really Latin. So AD means Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, and it's really a Christian reference. So it's referring to the death of Christ BC, before Christ, and Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. So, to be more politically correct these days, to avoid the religious annotations, the religious references, so some persons prefer to use BCE, before the Common Era, or CE, the Common Era, instead of the BC and AD, right? To avoid the religious references. Okay, so when we speak of the 1st century AD, we're talking about the years from 0 to 100 of the 1st century following the death of Christ. So the 2nd century would be 101 to 102. The 20th century therefore would be the years from 1901 to 2000, and we're presently living in the 21st century. So from 2001 and going up to 2100 will be the 21st century. So we're presently living in the 21st century of the Common Era, or AD, 21st century AD. So if we make reference to the 15th century, we're really talking about the 1400s. If we talk about the 12th century, we're really talking about the 1100s, right? From 1101 all the way up to 1200. All right, so that's it for units of time, and from the 2nd all the way to the millennium. All right, so if you benefited from this video, just drop a line to say thank you and share the video so others can benefit as well. All right, I'll see you in the next video.